All right, let me introduce our speaker for today. DeAnna has worked in the field of infant massage with parents and babies since 1981. She was trained by Vimala herself in 1982 as a trainer. She has been on the board of the US chapter and worked on the committee for trainer candidates through our international parent, the International Association of Infant Massage. So she helped people who wanted to become trainers become new trainers for all over the world. She has produced films and documentary on infant massage and the neuroscience of fetal development. Since 1980, she's been involved with personal and professional healing and has dedicated her life to assisting others in their healing. We now live in a very demanding time for that many of us, the demands for the release of the false self of our conditioning, we need to have that release so we can step into our higher nature without that influence. Her commitment is to assist both humans and animals in their healing to release unresolved traumas that interfere with the expression of our higher nature. The work she's presently doing to accomplish this is called Resonance Alchemy. And at the end, DeAnna will talk about some of the seminars and webinars that she does deliver outside of Infant Massage USA. And now, DeAnna, I'm going to pin you to the top and take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to everyone who's come to hear this presentation. I bow to you with gratitude that you are doing this work. It is profound. That's why it had my attention for 35 years as a trainer. I'm an inactive trainer now, but she pretty much told you everything I was going to tell you in my personal story. So once we get the slideshow in place, it will vary a little bit from how the slides go, but I'll stay congruent with the slides too. And something I have to say before we get started with the slideshow, we're becoming a highly technological world, and we're interacting with our devices, and I'm in this too, so much. And we're not having eye-to-eye contact, skin to skin. All the elements of bonding that infant massage activates. And so in my mind, those who teach this work are teaching how to keep the human heart alive alongside the technology. So on that note, we'll start our slideshow. So give me just a second. Oh my gosh. So last year, this talk was called The Delicate Art of Listening to Your Baby. And in this talk, I share a lot of case histories to help you understand the information about how does imprinting happen, what is it, what is she talking about, and we'll go very step by step through how it occurs from the minute a baby is conceived into the bonding phase. And in truth, it is not complicated once you understand what happens. So once the talk has occurred, then I will have space for questions. So let's see what the definition of imprinting is. Imprinting is, well, the first impressions register the deepest and last the longest. And those first impressions are at a cellular level because cells are, you could equate them to a computer chip. They have memory, they have a job to do, and we'll move on to, we don't need to hear my personal journey because she just shared that with you better than I could have done it myself. So imprinting the lasting impression beginning at a cellular level on a newly forming human being, starting with, whoops, come on, you. Okay, let's start with that first cell and see what happens. When the sperm and egg join and form the zygote is obviously in the mother's body, and it has a job to do, which is to send out receptors, those are the arrows, into the environment in which it's residing, mama's body, to collect emotional information and chemical information. The emotions that are expressed by the mother are what are picked up by the receptors, and that dictates the chemicals that come forward. So let's take this into another level. Let's talk about a conception that happens through a mutually agreed upon union that releases endorphins. Things are good. There's safety here. I'm loved. There is love. If the conception happens through a rape, all the emotions, fear, hatred, trauma, intense trauma, all the negative emotions happen. And so that activates stress hormones. Well, what that is a core belief. Those, and I've worked with babies conceived in a rape, and I'll tell you those case histories as we go along. Those babies who are conceived in a rape, growing in stress hormones, come out looking over their shoulder. They don't feel safe. They don't feel loved. They don't feel supported. And often, if it is a rape, then the mother doesn't want the pregnancy. The very hardest thing for a human to overcome is the sense of being not wanted. And I've seen this in babies I worked with through social services. I came across babies like that, and babies who'd been adopted and given up. And it's a very tough one to turn around. However, infant massage is hugely impacting for them in a positive way. And it's hard to turn around because it's a core belief. They simply don't feel worthy of anything. And so they don't, that shows in their personality. And unless an intervention comes along to change that, they grow up with that as a core belief. And therapy in this world does not consider the information I'm sharing with you in regard to how this personality forms. So a mutually agreed upon union, of course, that's what everybody, that's the ideal. People who love each other, people who want a child. I know lots of people who love each other and became pregnant by surprise, weren't expecting it to happen, didn't know for sure if that was the right time for them. And usually most conceptions are a mixed bag. And then you have the one of women who become single mothers. And that's a whole thing also. But to get back to the receptors are active all the way through the entire pregnancy. And so once that baby is conceived and turns from a zygote into a fetus, still receptors are gathering data from the mother's body. The relationship with the father has a lot to do with the mother's relationship with the father. And if it's not positive, she will be releasing stress hormones. If that child, this is so, if that child is surrounded by fighting parents, harsh sounds, harsh emotions while they're gestating, they come out feeling life is very unsafe. In regard to what is in this next slide, this is another way to look at the impact of imprinting from the environment. If you're in a very cold environment, like the North or South Pole, Alaska, places where there's long winters, Scandinavia, then that mother has a relationship with cold. Those receptors pick that up. If it's in the tropics and it's warm and it's comfortable most of the time and prolific with nature, that relationship is the one the mother has. But the environment she is in is also a factor in regard to what she's picking up with those receptors. The mother's body is the biggest factor of all. Her relationship with the father gives information about the father. If it's a loving couple and the father is talking to the belly, petting the belly, excited about this baby coming into the world, that establishes a very positive relationship with the father. If the father leaves the mother and she becomes a single mother on her own, that establishes the relationship with the father. And this goes on throughout the entire pregnancy. So let's move to gestation. Again, as I've been saying, everything the mother does has an impact on that child. Does she have healthy habits? Is she on drugs? Is she on alcohol? Does she smoke? They've found that smoking mothers often cause asphyxiation for the baby. You can imagine what other drugs that are even bigger and mind altering due to the fetus. And there's way too many drug exposed babies in our world. And one of the biggest things they need help with is detoxifying. So with infant massage, let's take the more difficult categories. The stroking tells the child's body, release your stress. The child's body is holding stresses in different places. And I'll tell you a case history pretty shortly about that. If the mother is sending signals to that baby, I don't want you, I don't want you, I don't want this baby. Again, as I said before, this baby feels like they're an unwanted child all the way through life, unless an intervention comes along. With infant massage, the hands are imparting love. The hands are imparting a message, release your stress. The hands are imparting, I care for you, you're important to me. Very important core belief to form in a human. Is she eating well? Is she exercising? Is she petting her belly? Is she talking to her belly? is she in an experience with that baby in the womb? That is a core belief that is very beneficial for that child. So you can see there's always dark or light about this, and most people, it's a range in between from the worst and the best. The concerns the mother has during the pregnancy. Well, do we have enough money? Can I be a good mother? Am I able to do this? All those things go through those receptors into that child as reference points that go with them in their personality into their adult life. Again, I'll say it, psychology does not go this far, and often psychology can only go so far with people to help them make changes. This work can antidote a lot of dark core beliefs in a positive way, and it helps the baby release the stress of not being wanted, of given away. Okay, I'm going to put in a case history here, and this is a case history. This is a child who was conceived in a rape, and her mother hid the entire, she was raped at a party. Her mother hid the entire pregnancy from her family. That hiding is a message: I don't want you. You can imagine what her emotions were at the rape. When it was time to deliver, she took a taxi to the hospital, had the baby, and gave it away. I came into the picture because I knew the people who adopted the baby. In this case, it was two women, both of whom were social workers. So when I first came to their household to show them infant massage, the baby was holding its body very tightly, very stiff, very rigid, would not look the mothers in the eye, and hardly ever made any sound with crying. And I'm looking at this child thinking, something's off here. What is this I'm seeing? So I said, do you know the birth story and the history that goes with this child? They told me the things they did know. They told me the things that I just shared with you. Mother was raped at a party, hid the pregnancy, and had the baby and gave it away. And so all the negative emotions from the conception, all the information that came to that mother or came from that mother saying, I don't want you. I don't want you. I'm hiding you. You don't exist. And then giving that child away. So it showed in the body language, holding very stiff and rigid, the refusal to give eye contact, because eye contact activates bonding. She had ruptured bonding. So, no, I will not bond. It's not safe. There's no one to bond with. So, I told them, this baby needs to cry. She's had so much trauma to this point. She needs to express herself. This is that former title, Delicate Art of Listening to Your Baby. I encouraged the crying. And I said, it's likely going to come strongest when we open the heart with the strokes for the heart. Because they were social workers, they actually could hear this. A lot of families can't, especially if it's the natal family. Adoptive families, which I worked with adoption a long time, it's easier to hear this because they feel like they are rescuing the baby. So the feet and the legs, that had a little crying. The gut, a little. But when the heart was opened and she was able to release her heartache, I said, get ready. That's the second class. Get ready to hear a lot of crying, tummy in the chest. And indeed, she cried her eyes out, and they held her in front of them and said I coached them to say to the baby, I hear you. Something was very hard for you. I hear you. I'm listening. And guess what happened? Third class, when we did the heart again, she cried again, but then she looked her two mothers straight in the eye. And that was a major change in her psychology. That was a life-changing time for her because she was willing to bond. And part of the reason is because she had been listened to. That day I left in tears myself, I have to admit. And in regard to very little expression, when I came back for the last class, which is the back, they said, this kid doesn't stop talking all day long. Babble, 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 on and on. Because she felt heard, she felt received, she felt respected. She was sharing her voice. And the hardest time she had to share that voice was when her heart was opened. But because she was listened to, she got through it and she was able to bond. Huge changes for that person. Huge in core beliefs. So the gestation phase is a very critical phase in regard to the relationship the mother has with the baby and the relationship the mother has with the father, and then the relationship the father has to the pregnancy. If he's in support of the pregnancy, that's a positive experience. If he's not, or if he has vanished, that's a negative experience. No matter what it is, the massage will help it release. So I hope that's making sense. Let's go to the birth. Okay, we have a lot of different births in this culture, a lot of different types. And I'm going to start from the bottom up. We'll start with what is the imprint and the impact of a premature birth. Okay, let's look at what happens to these babies. First of all, they're taken out of the belly before they're ready to come into this world. So they leave dark, contained, gravity-free, and come into light, sound, not contained, and often in birthing rooms, a lot of stress, especially with a premature baby. And then they're removed from the mother and put in an isolette, and often with feeding tubes in the mouth and other tubes in the body through needles. And it's very painful. And what do they bond with? Isolation, because they do not have a pair of human eyes to look into when they get here. And there's a man named Dr. Joseph Pierce. He's passed away since, but he wrote a book called Magical Child. And in that, he talks about the research that shows that a baby has got to have a pair of human eyes to look into when they first get here for certain brain functions to activate in the frontal lobes that have to do with the ability to relate to and have compassion for other human beings. That part does not activate. So there's a lot of babies who do not get to be with their mother looking into her eyes. And in regard to premature babies, that is absolutely true. And not only that, they've got these invasive tubes all over the place. And sometimes it's horrific what you see happening to them. Okay, they don't know that everything's being done for them to keep them alive. The way they see it, nothing is working in this world. And I worked, here's another case history, in a hospital in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I lived, and taught baby massage everywhere I could go, that they would listen to an in-service and receive me. And there was a hospital there, community hospital, asked me to come there and teach the nurses how to massage the preemies. And this was very, very early on in the work, and we didn't have the rule that only the mother can touch the babies and everybody else is working on a doll. But so what happened in that hospital, when I was there to show the baby massage, they brought me a baby to massage, a premature baby. And this baby would not look the mother in the eye. Why? Ruptured bonding. Also, tactile experience had been negative because of invasive needles and probes in the body. And so when they brought me this baby, the arms were over the chest, the legs were up over the torso, there, and the eyes were closed. And I'm looking at this baby thinking, I can't pry this baby open and insist on a massage right now. All the body language was closed. So I put my hands very gently under the backside, the bottom, and started rocking the baby in a very gentle way and saying mentally, not out loud, I'm here to help you feel better. I know it's been rough getting here. When you want me to stop, you show me with your body, and I will. And a leg came down into my hands. So I massaged that leg. And then another leg came down into my hands. Well, that was huge because the baby opened up enough to allow that to happen. And in this particular situation, I was demonstrating the whole entire massage. So I went from that to the tummy, and the baby seemed to be okay with that, but the arms were remained folded over the heart. So I simply placed my hands on the heart and just held them there for a while. And also said, you let me know when you're ready and I'll massage your heart. Well, the arms did not open, so I simply did strokes over the arms in the position they were in to show respect for the baby's body language. And then, of course, the face and the back. And there was not much expression from this baby at that time. But then when I was teaching the mother, she was doing the strokes. I was showing her the strokes, then she was doing the strokes. She said, you know, I don't think my baby likes me my baby won't look me in the eye. I said, well, she's not really ready for that yet. That's a developmental skill. And so just be patient. I think that will come. And when the mother had her hands placed on the baby's heart, the arms opened, and this baby looked her straight in the eye, and the whole room of nurses was crying. Everyone, me too, everybody saw such a dramatic shift in that child in response to the mother, and that was an antidote to a ruptured bonding. I hope this is making sense, and be sure and have your questions ready for things that don't make sense. So let's now move to suction and forceps. Both of those things are a process done with the head. Forceps squeeze the head and pull, and suction pulls the head from the top. And each of those things changes the sutures in the skull. Whenever I worked with babies who were forceps or suction, I would suggest that they take the baby to a craniosacral therapist, because their specialty is realigning the sutures in the skull. And it's very critical that there's alignment in those things. And I've watched those people when they work with babies, and yes, babies cry also when that process is done. And it is the therapist working on the baby. It's a little different than infant massage. But in the documentary I made, which I haven't mentioned yet, but we'll get to that, I did make a documentary about the imprinting process, but it has tribal birth wisdom in it. And all the tribal interviews I had, they always said, you never pull a baby out of the womb. You push the baby out from above, but you do not pull it out. So that really made sense to me, because tribal people have a lot of birth wisdom that's been lost to Western society. And yes, we may keep babies alive. And yes, we may have a stronger sterile field, but a lot of our birth practices create trauma. So let's move to C-section. Okay, C-section, this is when a baby is lifted out of the womb. They don't get the experience of going through the birth canal. And that squeezing of going through the birth canal tells the gastrointestinal system to start its functions. And often C-section babies are colicky. So many times in parent classes, the babies that would come in were colicky, and so many times they were cesarean births. And of course, we know that the strokes regulate that part of the body. And again, it's an antidote to not having the experience of going through the birth canal, which is actually the body's way of preparing the baby to leave dark, contained, gravity-free, and go into light, sound, air. And again, a C-section baby, they often come into chaos. So again, the massage is an amazing way to help those babies in regard to the way they were born. So water birth now is pretty common, and I was involved in the very first water birth school that opened in this country, in Austin, Texas. And I also went to Russia, 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 and to see the doctor over there who initiated water birth. And when I saw how peaceful water birth was, and those children in Russia who had come in, the birth occurred in water. Then the baby was brought up out of the water after the birth, and the original fears were they could drown. But the impulse to breathe doesn't happen until the cord is cut. So the air, the oxygen supply goes through the cord while they're in the water. And the mother's body is also water. And the goal with water birth is to emulate the mother's body. So water birth was the most peaceful way I've seen. The doctor in Russia was taking his birthing mothers to the Black Sea, where they'd go into the waters of the Black Sea and birth those babies, and dolphins would show up and with their sonar influence the birth for the positive with their sonar. And those children could be in water 8 hours a day, easy. They were almost land creatures and water creatures at the same time. Natural birth at home, which is done with midwifery, is my favorite. That's the way I think is the best, where there's more of a home atmosphere. And yet midwives and medical people have rules they have to follow. And I'm not speaking against medical people. 90% of all births are in the hospital because people are afraid, want to have the help if something goes wrong. And I understand that. And medical people and certified midwives are under a lot of pressure around litigation. And in either case, if they think something could go wrong, that baby is born cesarean. End of story. With natural birth, with midwifery, they'll take the mother to the hospital for that kind of delivery, and in the hospital, that is done. So you've already heard what the implications of that birth are. And so the birthing experience is also critical to the imprinting that occurs for that child. And the most important thing after the birth, I've already said it, is for that baby to be able to look into a loving person's eyes, ideally the mother. Sometimes it's not the mother. Sometimes it's an adoptive family. And sometimes it's the father if things have gone very difficult for the mother. The litigation factor, I knew pediatricians who had to leave their practice because their malpractice insurance was more than they made. It was just enormous, the pressure they were under. So it had an impact on how the birth was done, always. And again, as I just said, if they think something's going to go wrong, cesarean is the answer. Get that baby out. So I have a couple more case histories I want to share before we move on. One is a story about a family that was close by me where I live. And it was a very loving family. Wanted the baby, mother ate well, she exercised, the father was right there with her, he talked to the belly, they wanted this baby. But in the birthing experience, The mother pushed for 12 hours with nothing. So finally, a C-section was done, and what they found was that the cord was wrapped around the entire torso of the baby. So every time mother pushed, the cord got tighter. And so the baby came out blue, had to be resuscitated. It was very hard on both the mother and the baby physically, not to mention emotionally. And when I went to the household to teach this family the massage, it was the daddy who was doing the massage. And I suggested that there would be times during the massage that the baby would cry. And when the daddy got to the torso and started the massage there, started to happen. The crying started to happen. His words were, "I don't think my baby likes me." I said, "No, no, no. She's telling her big, strong daddy her story about how scary it was to be trapped in mama's tummy. And she needs you more than anybody in the whole world to hear that story." His face changed from one of self-doubt to one of, "Tell me all about it, honey. I'm right here and I'll be here for the rest of your life." And she cried her eyes out. She cried her eyes out for the first 3 classes. Then after that, it was nothing but pleasure. The whole entire body. She was completely opened, and she changed from a child who had a very furrowed, withdrawn expression to one who had total, complete excitement about life. "Who are you? What's that over there? Oh, let's go over here." Just completely thrilled. And she and her daddy were so bonded. It was amazing. And that was another time I got to witness the change of a core belief that was negative, not because there weren't loving parents, but because of that cord. And that, of course, brought tears to my eyes and the eyes of the whole family. And that little girl, I found out later about how she was as a little girl, and she was very open and very excited about life. And I doubt very much that that would have been true had she not had a chance to process through the crying to the daddy and the strokes and the massage her experience. Because what you're saying to a baby's body is release your stress. The parents, in truth, don't even have to know what it's about. The strokes will release it where it is held in the body. And I always encourage people to listen to the crying so the baby feels received and heard. And what that leads to is then, as that child is growing up and they go through their 2-year-old experiences of falling and hurting themselves and needing mommy or needing daddy, the parents can listen. And for such a long time, and Dr. Spock taught this, you don't do that. You isolate the child and leave them alone. And then what does that lead to? A very big, difficult time with intimate relationships because they haven't had it. It hasn't been an imprint for them, especially when they have difficult feelings that they don't know what to do with. This also teaches the child to accept their difficult feelings because other people accepted their difficult feelings. They don't have to run hide when they have them. So across the board, it's a cultural change to listen to the child in all forms of expression instead of shame them, send them off to be alone, or leave them in a crib by themselves. So let's move to, whoops. Gosh, this is so sensitive. I want to go to, this isn't here, the bonding phase. Once again, as I've been saying, very critical for that baby after birth to look into a pair of human eyes, ideally eyes that show love for them. That's how they've been received, for that frontal lobe activation of the brain, very critical for relational ability, that frontal lobe location. And when babies are removed for all kinds of things, all the procedures the hospital has, the belief that the baby and the mother's tired, she needs to be left alone. The mother needs that baby as bad as the baby needs her right after birth. The most important thing to do is leave the mother and the baby to be with each other. But in many cases in hospitals, the baby's removed. And so that contributes to ruptured bonding. How does that look in the adult psychology? People who don't know how to bond, people who have trouble with intimacy, people who hide their feelings, and it's unhealthy behaviors. And as a culture, at least in my generation, and I'm 77, so I guess you could say I'm from the old school, but children were not listened to when they were children, much less babies, and babies for sure were not listened to. So what I feel to encourage bonding is listen to them, let their expression come out and receive it. I hear you. Something's been very hard for you. Usually the parent will know because they're tuned into their child. But it doesn't matter if they know. It doesn't matter. Simply to say, I hear you, I'm listening, is enough. And look them in the eye. Let them show their difficult expressions. So, whoops. As I've been saying, this work, because of all the stories and the case histories I've shared, and how infant massage can change those negative core beliefs. It is actually an antidote to violent behavior. And there was a book written in the 80s about, and I have to think of the title for a minute, about serial killers and what was the baseline of those personalities, what was common to all serial killers in the person's research about this, because it's a very hard one to understand. It was called, the book is Children Without a Conscience. That's it. And the baseline was they were all non-bonded babies. They didn't have that brain formation to encourage that skill. So, and to speak on behalf of hospitals in the last number of years have really been trying to humanize the birthing process with birthing rooms that have a lot of a home feeling. And they do, when at all possible, allow the babies to stay with the mothers. And so there is progress within hospitals. And hospital births are often traumatic. So they are trying to improve their situation and their circumstances. And they're also up against that thing I mentioned before, litigation. So it's a tough road for them. And birth isn't easy. Again, the transition from the womb to the world through all those stages is very impacting for all humans in regard to what happens to them in all those stages. As I mentioned in the documentary I created, and I don't see that it's in the slides. I'm sorry about that, but I will write it in the chat. It's on YouTube. It's easy to find, and I'll put the title of it in the chat. Type in that title, you have it. It is called Cellular Echoes, Environmental Influences in the Journey from the Womb to the World. The case history I would like to share, or the interview I would like to share from that documentary, the indigenous interview, came from a woman named Sabanfu Somé, who grew up in a village in West Africa in Burkina Faso. And in her village, now think about this story in regard to imprinting. In her village, when a couple was wanting to conceive, they did many rituals and ceremonies to invite that child into the woman's body. They also built an altar to that baby, and everybody in the whole village placed something on the altar to welcome it in. After the conception had happened, many rituals were done to release the old wounds of the parent so they would not transfer to the baby. The grandparents in some of those rituals were given the name, which meant the life purpose of that child. So the grandparents were the ones who named the child. Think of the welcome those things show. Then, when the mother is doing the physical birth, all the women in the village are squatting and pushing with her. And for them, birth is squatting. While the mother is doing the physical birth, the father is with the men doing the spiritual birth. And when that baby comes in, the children are singing to the baby. Think about that imprint and the implications for those children. She did not know she had one mother until she was 5 years old. All women nursed the babies in the whole village. We can't even imagine in this culture what that would be like. When she came here, she was married to someone who came to school at a university and then teach in a university. And it was very hard for her to transition into this culture. Very, very hard. So that's my presentation. Let's open this up for questions and come back into a group of people on this webinar.
There is a few questions in the chat. Lisa,
Okay.
Let's start with Olivia's question. Is it possible for the baby to receive positive eye contact from nurse with benefits?
I think yes, because what I think is anybody who is, because sometimes nurses are in charge with babies, early on. That is who that baby has to be with. And anytime it's a positive exchange, it's beneficial. That's my answer.
Wonderful. And two questions from Lisa really quick. Lisa wanted to ask what you were just talking about. What culture was that story about?
It was from West Africa in Burkina Faso.
Okay. And then her previous question was in the story with the father, did dad, people are asking questions now, and hold on, I gotta scroll up in the chat. Did dad continue to massage during the crying in those first 3 sessions?
No, he would stop and listen and then resume the massage unless the baby was showing body language that said, this is enough for now. Is that adequate answer? But not during the strong crying. No, he just held her in his hands, looked her in the eye, and gave her his full attention.
Wonderful. I think that's a good answer. That's what they were looking for. Helen asked, the bonded baby and dad, were mom and baby bonded and happy together too?
Could you say that again, please?
So the story about the bonded baby with the dad. At the end of the day, was the mother and the baby bonded as well? Were they happy?
Yes. Yes. The mother was present and she was crying, of course, because she was part of that experience and she also went through a lot. But the father included her, and the last class, that child was being held by both parents. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And then he taught her the strokes, and that too was beautiful.
Wonderful. Helen, I'm going to skip over your question about more info on the West African village, and maybe I can give you DeAnna's email and you guys can talk about that there. Because
Right.
Patricia asked, are they still using forceps for deliveries and how often, if you know?
I don't know the rate, but I think if they can use suction, it's a preference. But either way, it changes those sutures in the skull. And that is absolutely not good for the baby. They need to get those sutures synchronized.
I have to segue. I have two things. I'm trying to go down the list, but I'm bebopping a little quick. Tanya asked, what was the full title of Cellular Echoes? And I just wanted people to know that in the chat, I put a link to the YouTube video for it.
Yay. Thank you.
It's in there because it's a mouthful. So I have the YouTube video in the chat for you. There's that. And then going back to the dad and the baby real quick. Kathy asked, so what message did it give that the child was crying and no one spoke comforting words to her? Like were they speaking?
Which example are you referring to?
I think it, and Kathy can write in the chat if she can, but I think this was the story between like the dad and the baby. And somebody asked like when she was really crying. Yeah, this was about when she cried for the first 3 sessions. Like were there comforting words being spoken to her?
Yes. Oh yes. I hear you. I'm listening. I'm here for you. Tell me all about it. Yes. I love you.
I'm multitasking. Okay, trying to hit some of those questions that were asked earlier. Okay, that one. Karen asks, what might it mean if an infant rarely cries but sleeps well?
I don't see that as a negative thing. Quite frankly, I think trust that the infant is doing what they need to do. Trust. I used to have a lot of judgments toward hospitals and the traumas I was seeing from hospital births, but then my attitude shifted to babies have the birth they're supposed to have given what they're here to work out. And so I don't judge the hospitals anymore. In fact, I have a lot of compassion for the pressure they're under to save babies and litigation and all the rest. It's hard. It's hard. And they don't know this. They don't know this part. This isn't what they're taught in medical school, so it's not a reference point for them. But the wonderful thing about infant massage is if those babies can receive massage, they can release those traumas no matter what they are. Again, as I said before, they don't have to know what they are. They just have to listen to the crying.
Moving on with some of the questions, a different Lisa Pearl asks, are sutures impacted if the provider pulled the baby out with their hands due to the shoulder being stuck in the birth canal?
I think sutures can be impacted in that way. And I think regular birth, in truth, can impact sutures because birth is not easy, even through the birth canal. It just isn't. And I see Stephanie agreeing with me. She's a mom. She would know. It's just hard. It's hard for moms. It's hard for babies. It's just hard. That's true. And I always recommend cranial sacral work for new babies because they can realign the sutures.
And Helen would like to pick your brain on this question. Are labor and delivery nurses learning more techniques for pushing rather than pulling?
Boy, I don't have an answer for that. Honestly, I don't. I would say put that into Google and see what kind of answer you get. I'm sorry I don't have an answer. That's why I like midwifery, because there's much more emphasis on squatting, in truth, not laying on the back. And squatting is what the indigenous people, all indigenous people do. It works well with gravity. The gravitational pull on the baby's body helps it to come out, especially when there's pushing. So I don't know if that helped.
Helen, you as a former trainer, Helen Moses in the crowd, yay! Helen, our board members, especially Dr. Perez. Dr. Perez works in the NICU with opioid addicted babies a little bit more than labor and delivery necessarily, but Dr. Perez on the board would be a good person to email as well about that. She might have some better statistics, or if somebody in the crowd who is labor and delivery, anything, has some information. If you could pop that in the chat, that'd be wonderful too.
Great.
All right, another question. Unfortunately, this person doesn't have a name, but it says, when a mother suffers from postpartum depression and still tries to offer that love to the baby despite rejection, what's the most advisable thing to do?
Yeah, postpartum depression is hard. And I think part of the answer is for her to get the nutritional help she needs to, and perhaps a little therapy for her about what that birth was like for her, because a lot of times mothers go through very difficult experiences, and because all the attention is on the baby, they get left behind in a certain manner of speaking. And I think there's probably all kinds of therapies for postpartum depression. You'd have to Google that to find out. But she can still impart love and understand she needs love also. She needs somebody who cares about her experience. And we, infant massage people, can offer that. I would often, when babies would cry in class, sometimes I would stop the whole class, and the baby that was crying, I'd go put my hand on the mother's shoulder and say, it's really hard to hear your baby cry this way, isn't it? To give her support, to help her know that people see her experience, because a lot of times nobody's thinking about the mother. They're thinking about the baby.
in between some of the questions, this was a comment. Most people are saying thank you from Spain. Thank you. This was a fantastic presentation, very informative. It will change how I deliver infant massage. I love the work that you're doing. I'm a breath worker, and in the work, we go back to look at the birth history as it holds energy and trauma at times that creates patterns in life. I hope that doing this work can help. And then another question from Kate. DeAnna, with referencing to cranial sacral therapy, would you recommend certified trainers from the John Upledger Institute to parents that would need it? Or is there another avenue?
Yes, I would recommend them. And I want to tell you what I offer beyond this is a lot of times people, they hear this talk, they're wondering about their own imprinting. All the people who are on this Zoom, you have it as well. And I do private sessions with people to identify where the traumatic imprints are. And then I can point to things in people's behaviors, ask if you're showing these behaviors. And then I have a healing process, which Stephanie mentioned in the beginning, that's done long distance, that can start to release those early traumas for adults. So if you're interested in that, say so in the chat, and I will send you a write-up about it, explaining how it all works.
Okay, so she said that, and a lot of you guys are going to be you're going to be interested. So what I'm going to nab, give me a second. I am going to nab. Is it okay if I put out your email for people to copy and paste?
Please
yeah,
do.
because the best thing would be just to email her. I'm going to paste that in there. So that went directly to somebody instead of the group chat. I'm sorry, Marceline. I wasn't trying to. Okay, because Marceline direct messaged me. Okay, yes. So I have put DeAnna's email, deannasunstar@gmail.com. You can email her with your questions if you need extra help. Like we had, I'm gonna go up. I'm using my husband's mouse. Mine died in the middle of the presentation. Like Angie. Angie said, I live in Spain. Is this the chat that you're talking about for people only living in the United States? Can we get this information too? And we try to make it possible for everybody around the world. We're more than happy to try to find simis and people in Spain that might be a little bit closer. But also, Angie, you can use DeAnna's email to contact her. And DeAnna, I'm sure with you being maybe not an active, but international trainer all the same, that you know people who it might be easier, to get a hold of in different avenues.
Well, the private sessions I'm talking about right now, that's something I offer, and I don't know anybody else who does this type of work with this long distance healing, but I'm sure Spain has a chapter. And if you want more information about infant massage, go to that chapter's website.
And a lot of these people here too, they're US members of our chapter. So they might live in Spain, and we have a few people in Venezuela. I think Adriana is a trainer. And we have these people, and so we're gonna do this, and we also can bring this to the GA. I can bring it to some of the trainers and see what they know. And Cristina Zapata, our Spanish speaking trainer. Let me just look if there was any other questions. I was more direct. Helen just said, I'm so glad to hear about the shifts. You talked about the cultural shifts to listening to crying. Patricia said that she was going to make the suggestion that body works helps with postpartum depression. Everybody's saying thank you. Fantastic presentation. Somebody asked, will the slides be available for reference? Yes, we will get these slides to you along with a cleaned up recording of the presentation. It might be about a week, but you guys will get it. And then Helen finishes off the comments with, I've been pursuing a venue and aching to start offering local classes. Now I'm reminded the space shall be supportive of listening to crying and may work better in some venues than others. Thank you, Deanna. You're a wonderful shining star. Thank you so much for information. Here comes my little one back from a cry.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure to do this talk with everyone. And again, I bow to you with gratitude for doing the work that keeps the human heart alive.
We thank you. Thank you. Everybody is pouring out their thank yous and their love in the comments. They thank you so much for doing this, Deanna.
Yeah.
You had 70 pairs of eyes on you today. It is the work you do is important and it is loved.